A woman in the Old Testament always represents the people of God. Hello? The people of God.
Me, Pastor Lake, is that this woman in Revelation chapter 12 lives for 1,260 years. Now, I don't know about Dr. Boyce or Miles, but I've never heard of anybody living that long. Let's go ahead and continue with our video then, Pastor Lake. See what else our critics have to say and then respond accordingly.
And then how he understood the woman in the passage is quite fascinating. Very, very off from early interpretations of the book of Revelation. So I think that when you start your premise with a presupposed interpretation that doesn't do the diligent work of actually breaking it down, he would find that his view of the woman there is in a very, very small minority on being the church, because he said it's the church, when most would interpret the woman to be either 2 to 3 things. Number one, a restored and glorified Israel, producing the child, or some would go on to say that it even represents a twofold in that it is Israel, but specifically the woman being Mary. And we could possibly get into that. I think anybody that reads that would think Mary, or the third possibility that the terminology that is used here goes back to a Genesis 3 prediction, the seed of the woman. So this vision is supposed to make us go back to Genesis 3. It's supposed to take us even into Genesis 34 all the way into 40, where Joseph and dreams and visions, and then the 12 stars. I mean, look at the description around her. This is stuff that you see in Genesis and Exodus language. Even Isaiah refers to Israel as the woman, or Lamentations. Jeremiah refers to the city of Zion as the woman. You have the seed of the woman. You have the building of that through the prophets. So there's a lot there that most scholars would land on as the interpretation, because in his interpretation of the word church, he's saying that the church produced Jesus ultimately. If the woman is the church produced Jesus, when that's not the case. Jesus said, I will build my church. The church was produced by Jesus, not the other way around. So it's already built on a faulty exegesis just in Revelation 12. And I could go on. I could do a whole lecture on Revelation 12 by itself and how to interpret it back in chapter 11. But I don't think that's the point of the program.
So, Lake, are you saying that the church produced Jesus?
Yeah. There they go again, just reading stuff into what I'm saying that's not there. Again, as I've already said, I wasn't doing a detailed analysis of the woman through Revelation 12. Like him, I could go on for a long time about this, a detailed verse-by-verse movement through that passage. It's just a lot of what he said, he's right. And I would agree, going back to the Old Testament imagery. And if you do that, you find that a woman in the Old Testament always represents the people of God. Hello? The people of God. So I just find it interesting that he says that I wrongly identified the woman as the church, and that this is a minority among interpreters. I went through just recently, when I was reviewing this, a host of commentaries that I own, hundreds of commentaries I've collected over the years, and going through them just to see what they say. And the idea that saying that the woman represents the church is a very a view in the minority. Wow. I read the basic commentaries that give an overview of the text, what I call lightweight commentaries for my students, and up to the heavyweight commentaries that are heavy, detailed into the Greek and exegesis of the passage. And most of them recognize this, that at the beginning, the woman is Israel, okay? Even our own Adventist scholar, Renko Stevanovic, in his commentary on Revelation, he says, and I quote, the celestial woman of Revelation 12 apparently represents Old Testament Israel with their 12 tribes bringing into being the Messiah. Okay? They're just reading something. It wasn't fair because I wasn't taught. That wasn't the main focus of the topic. It's, of course, Jesus came from Israel, all right? So and many scholars believe that the woman is Israel, both Old Testament and New Testament believers. But they clearly recognize, as you go through the passage, when you come to verse 13 and onward, once Christ has been exalted and the devil leaves, turns from Christ and begins to persecute his people, he goes after and follows them into the wilderness. Well, that's the people of God. That's the believers in Christ. Is it the ecclesia, the gathering, the church? And here's a classic commentator. This is by a well-known Greek scholar, New Testament scholar of yesteryear, Leon Morris. I have many of his works and have appreciated them. He wrote much about the cross of Christ and the apostolic preaching of the apostles and so forth. But in a more simple commentary, but a good commentary, Revelation Introduction, the Tyndale commentary, he says this, and he captures what I've seen most commentators say. For the early Christians, there was an important continuity between the old Israel and the church, the true Israel. Here, the woman, undoubtedly Israel, who gives birth to the Messiah, but later in the chapter, he's talking about at the beginning of the chapter, when the woman first comes on the scene, but later in the chapter, she is the church who is persecuted for her faith. I mean, that's pretty obvious as you follow the text. That's what I'm referring to, is the woman in the latter part of the verse. All of the imagery that our good doctor brings out, from Genesis 34 and the 12 stars and Isaiah and Jeremiah, all of that, I agree with that. That's correct. Now, the position, he mentioned several positions. The one that I would probably lean toward the most is that John is pulling from imagery in Genesis 3, the Genesis 3:15, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, the two great categories of humanity, those who follow the seed of the woman, which the Messiah would come from, and those who follow the seed of serpent, the believers in Christ, the believers in Satan, the followers of Satan. And you follow that all the way down here, and that imagery is taking place right here in Revelation 12. And that clarifies about the remnant, it clarifies about the woman and the dragon and all of that. And I would see that in that framework. And so the woman it represents God's people throughout history, with the Jews, and then moving on to all believers, that is both Jews and Gentiles. Last time I checked, all the people of God, that's the ecclesia, that's the church. So anyway, that's not a detailed exegesis of it, but that's enough to show that I was clearly unfairly misread here and misinterpreted.
Yeah. Ironically, in his explanation of the woman, he does give multiple texts. And one of the texts that he points to, and I'll quote him, even Isaiah refers to Israel as the woman, as the woman, or in Lamentations, Jeremiah refers to the city of Zion as the woman, close quote. And so even he is able to see some reason, something there that there is evidence, biblical evidence, that the church can itself be represented by the woman, or be represented as a woman. As a matter of fact, in Acts chapter, I'll pull this up here real quick, so everybody can see it for themselves. Acts chapter 7, we have the church itself being referred to as a woman, the church in Israel. You can see it right there in Acts chapter 7. We go back a little bit here.
Say the key to unlocking the book of Revelation is the Old Testament imagery that John uses. That's the key. So you got to go see how woman is used in the rest of the Bible.
Yeah, and that being said, there's another text we can go to real quick in Isaiah 66. But here we have in Acts chapter 7, verse 38, this is he that was spoken in the church in the wilderness, with the angel which spake to him in at Mount Sion. In Isaiah 66, interestingly enough, in this text, you have almost, same verbiage that you find as in Revelation chapter 12 in regards to the woman. Before she travailed, she brought forth. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child. Who has heard of such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day, or shall a nation be born? For as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children. Same verbiage. And incidentally, Revelation is quoting either directly or indirectly, for the most part. I read this ironically, from a Presbyterian scholar of his paper. almost a little over half of Revelation is actually quoting either directly or indirectly from Old Testament texts. And here we have a clear explanation of that woman being Zion itself. I'm going to show on the screen for a moment, Pastor Lake, if you don't mind. One thing I wanted to share, go ahead and stop my screen and share one more. So here we have on the screen just a little bit of a parallel, you might say, or explanation rather. Very briefly, you can see why I believe it can't be Mary for multiple reasons, right? You have some clues in chapter 12, and you have some reasons why it can't be Mary in the middle column here. And then you have a more consistent biblical and historical explanation as to what these things may represent, the church throughout history, basically. And one thing that stands out the most here for me, Pastor Lake, is that this woman in Revelation chapter 12 lives for 1,260 years. Now, I don't know about Dr. Boyce or Miles, but I've never heard of anybody living that long unless we go back to Old Testament times.
Literal Mary doesn't fit.
It just doesn't really fit. And so as I see it, the most logical explanation is really that it doesn't represent Mary. Now, of course, that's just a little bit of information of which much more we can get into, and for sake of time we don't, but I just don't think that it fits to say that. I don't agree with the idea that I think anybody who reads this, like he's saying, will think Mary. I don't think so. When I read 1,260 years, when I read of a woman hiding in the wilderness or water trying to drown her and the earth opening to swallow up that water to save her, I'm thinking if a woman represents a church, that fits very good with the church throughout history being persecuted, incidentally under the Roman power.
Yeah, the language is highly symbolic. That's how you can't approach Revelation literally. It doesn't.
Definitely not. And it's a good idea to allow the Bible to do its own explaining of these symbols. And as we saw, if you go to the text that he pointed out in the book of Isaiah and Lamentations and Jeremiah, Isaiah 66 that we saw, if we allow the where John is pulling from in the Old Testament to help us in our interpretations and let the Bible explain itself, it becomes quite clear who that woman actually is. It's definitely not the Virgin Mary.